It's the morning before Christmas, counting down the hours, maybe with excitement, but not necessarily with the excitement of the economy and how things have been run. Yesterday, the president granted a media chat, and that would form the core part of our conversations this morning. You're welcome to Breakfast Central. I'm Olive Emodi.
And I am Osalgi Ogbonwa. Thank you very much for joining us, as always. New Tuesday morning here to discuss for the next 2 hours some of the major conversations happening across Nigeria, and yes, including the president's media chat that took place yesterday. It's all over the newspapers this morning. Some of the key statements that he made during that media chat. Remember to please be a part of our conversation simply by tweeting at us this morning at News Central TV. If you're watching on YouTube, also do well to drop a message on our YouTube page. But yes, now getting into it, just a little bit here and there.
Before you talk about the core of the message, I think we should first talk about the very terribly poor audio for a number of minutes. That's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have, reacted to that. It was broadcast on the NTA, which, of course, again, I remember, I think it was in the Bola administration where there was, a budget or a bill that was meant to, give the NTA, I think it was about $500 million. I'm not sure if I get that number correct, but it was a significant amount of money that was meant to be awarded to the NTA to improve on its services and upgrade on the quality of broadcast that it had. But it doesn't seem like a lot has changed, and many people did complain about the quality of audio from the media chat. But I feel like that is, I mean, it's not shocking, and so I don't think a lot of people should focus much on it.
Because it's also, again, another level of display mediocrity. A presidential, for whatever reason, a random TV show can have really poor quality, but a presidential media chat that has been pre-planned and prepared for should not have that quality of
I agree with that, and it again shows the level of attention to detail that we put on these things. And if you remember during the elections, many people said that if you give the people who handle events in Lagos the job of delivering Nigeria's elections, and the logistics that are required to deliver the elections, that they would do a much better job than INEC did with the simple task of, really just delivering the logistics on time and ensuring that everything went according to plan, that they would do a much better job. So it basically, once again, is a reminder that when it comes to national issues and things that concern Nigerians in particular, the Nigerian state doesn't necessarily pay that much attention to detail and may not go, above and beyond to ensure that it gives the best quality and the best standard to Nigeria's issues, here and there. But, focusing on the content of the media chat itself, many people did describe it again as pretty uninspiring. And this is not necessarily knocking the president, every opportunity that Nigerians have. There's many people who would almost never find anything good, in Nigeria's president. And that's, they're within their rights to do so. But it's really just being realistic and sharing what many people, expressed, that it was mostly uninspiring. It didn't necessarily, say a lot that told Nigerians or give Nigerians the confidence that they were once again on the right path. I remember one of the questions that was asked with regards to, the fight against corruption, which I have repeatedly spoken about, that Nigeria needs a systemic fight against corruption. It's not simply arresting a few people here and there. Yes, those, parts must work. People who, are found to maybe have mismanaged government funds must be arrested, must be prosecuted, and of course, if found guilty, should face the law, no doubt. But the fight against corruption, and I think many people should understand that it's not simply just being able to arrest people. It's being able to set the systems in place that stop the stealing of Nigeria's money. And I have said it, that, I don't think that we've done anything different. I don't think that we've changed our approach towards the fight against corruption in MDAs across the country, even before you talk about politicians, because the focus a lot of times is on politicians. But before you even talk about politicians, the stealing, the leakages that happen in MDAs across Nigeria, the federal, state, and local government level, is completely insane. And this has continued to happen unabated. Nothing really is slowing that down. But when Mr. President was asked a question yesterday, he first of all spoke about increasing minimum wage. He said that, him being able to move the national minimum wage from 35,000 to 70,000 for him was a fight against corruption, because he just puts more money in people's hands. But obviously, the reaction to that will be that 70,000 naira of today is arguably worth even less than 35,000 naira that it was before. You know, seeing the value of the naira as of, 2024 December. And so it's not necessarily solved that problem if that's what he believes is fight against corruption. And then, one of the journalists there then asked further that it's not just about petty stealing, it's also about the grand corruption. And then she used the example of the 720-something duplexes that were found in the FCT, allegedly belonging to the former CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, allegedly. And Mr. President's response once again was that, well, at least they were able to get those houses from, the person who allegedly, built them. And again, just to reiterate, I understand that people should be arrested, but that is not fighting corruption. The systems that should fight corruption, that make it difficult for you to sign off 200 million naira to a different account where it shouldn't go, those little things here and there.
Right.
I spoke about, I think I probably would bring this up, that when you hear that a governor stole 100 billion naira, is alleged to have stolen 100 billion naira, it's not because he went to the state, bank account and transferred money by himself. He didn't go to the state vault in Government House and take 100 billion naira and was moving it to his account or moving it to his offshore account by himself. That's not it. It is because there are people who overlooked, the mismanagement of money. The Attorney General not the Attorney General, the Auditor General of the state, the Commissioner for Finance, local government chairmen, House of Assembly members. There's many other factors that make corruption possible. And those are the things that I feel like we should try to start to place a focus on. Right. How do we set systems that make it difficult to steal,
in the first
not
place,
just arresting people? Because we've seen that even when you arrest or when you name these high-profile individuals, a lot of times that whole judicial process doesn't end with any of these people actually serving jail time. And,
in response to that, talking about people not serving jail time, that's one of the criticism that's been leveled against the media chat, the fact that when the president was asked about the removal of subsidy, and he said he had no regrets in removing subsidy, and talked about how payment of subsidy was creating an avenue for a lot of stealing to be carried out. A number of the questions asked were that if you can say that so and so was recovered because you stopped paying subsidy, how about naming the people who were involved in this quote-unquote stealing? How about naming them and prosecuting them? No arrests were made, no names were mentioned, no prosecution. Are we going to really say we don't know, those who were involved in cutting corners, who have been involved in cutting corners? But I think I want to start on a positive note, and positive note being here that the fact that this presidential media chat happened in the first place. And we've been calling for a presidential media chat for the longest time, criticized the president for not showing up for presidential debates and speaking up, saying he went to Chatham House, spoke at Chatham House, designated people to answer questions in a number of scenarios, but never really, had the opportunity to speak with Nigerian journalists. So I think, first of all, this I would applaud as a step in the right direction. The argument to be whether it was live, it was recorded. It's a first media chat. Hopefully there'll be more. Hopefully they'll take feedback from the criticism that they've seen from this one and then create a more inclusive media chat. I've seen people calling for phone calls, that the president should have a media chat where Nigerians can call in. That's not going to happen. How many countries would that happen in? Let's be realistic and practical with our demands. That's, on the one hand, about it being positive. He was being asked about the stampedes that have occurred, whilst, expressing his condolence to, or extending his condolence to those who lost their loved ones at the various stampedes. He did make reference to how he's been giving every year for over, I think, 25 years in body loan, and he gives to the less privileged, saying that, in a way, some would say taking a jab at those who are doing this act of benevolence, saying if you don't have enough to give, don't announce it, so that maybe like a crowd wouldn't come. And taking a jab as well at the planners, talking about it being a planning problem. What he probably hasn't realized or didn't make reference to is the fact that Nigeria has had a poverty problem over the years, but particularly in the past 1 year, things have become incredibly hard. So whilst we can say that, yes, people have been doing acts of benevolence, is it impossible for him to completely detach himself for the reason why this has happened, right? The reason why people would risk their lives to get 5,000 naira. So part of the criticism is saying, you're throwing jabs at the planners, and rightfully so. They didn't do their due diligence. They didn't ensure that there was adequate planning to guarantee the safety, security of lives, of the lives of Nigerian citizens. But what role do you play in all of this? How have you mitigated or exacerbated the hardship that Nigerians have experienced in the past couple of years. So I think that, that's one of the criticism that's been leveled against him. Some have said that there aren't as many clear answers. I'm really glad that we'll be talking about this conversation in depth as we proceed with the show. And then we'll be taking some of the reactions that Nigerians have to, the presidential media chat. But yes, this is the first one. I'm hoping that there'll be subsequent, there'll be more.
Yeah.
And that this time around, it will not be something that will be sprung on us as a surprise. Let Nigerians prepare towards it. Let people send in questions to the journalists. Let Nigerians know, these are the journalists, and then they can share their questions. But I think one key area that I had hoped that would be highlighted, but I mean, I don't know if I missed it, was this administration's obedience to the rule of law. There have been a number of arrests that have been made, a number of people who would say that Nigeria's criminal justice system has been one that, rather than grant them liberties or upholds their rights, has infringed on their rights. There's so many cases that easily come to mind. And a number of that wasn't, I don't think that the media chat highlighted enough about the rule of law. I know that they can't touch on every issue, but that was one area I was hoping that we'll shine some focus on.
And that is an opportunity to once again, speak on when the president said that we're doing things different now, which, many people would say that is not very true. The way with which Nigeria is being run today, I mean, except you would say, or you would argue that the removal of fuel subsidies, is doing things different. Okay, but the general idea with which the way the country is being run is no different from the way it's been run before. And I pointed out the budget yesterday, and the fact that we are still having pretty much the same, it's like a mirror image of what previous budgets have been like. The same issues, the same line items in the budget that everybody can see, obviously, that this is, absolutely wrong. There's not much difference. The only thing that is different really is the people that are now in those positions. He also spoke about, the size of his cabinet and, the fact that it's not left to him. He wouldn't want to reduce the number of people in his cabinet because those people are there for, specific reasons. But that counters the idea of cutting down the cost of governance. And can Mr. President today say that he truly is taking steps to cut the cost of governance?
He doesn't intend to cut down, his cabinet. He even asked them to name a minister that is not working, basically because he believes firmly that all his ministers are working. So,
my point really is that nothing really is different with the way that the country is being run, with the way that the National Assembly, the way that the Nigerian justice system, the way that the executive and everyone really is running Nigeria. There's not much difference if we are being very, very honest. It's just a different set of people that are now in those positions doing the same things that Nigerians have always complained about.
Again, final thoughts on this, because we'll still talk about it more. Just to piggyback of what you've highlighted, in the sense that you can't be saying that he is saying that this is just an 18-month tenure, and that right now they're going through a very rough patch, but it wasn't intended to cause and inflict pain on Nigerians. But Nigerians will not believe you if you're not leading by example in terms of cutting costs of governance on your own end. So what exactly is the administration doing about cutting the cost of governance, and was the response, did they give a sufficient explanation towards cutting the cost of governance? If you're not cutting, you can't ask the Nigerian people to manage. But we'll talk more about this shortly, and then we'll take what Nigerians are saying about this on X. But let's share with you what our top stories for today are. President Tinubu holds first media chat with journalists is how we began our conversation today, and will form the core of our conversations today. Nigerians lament high cost of living amid Yuletide celebration. And this is a prevailing conversation. We started yesterday and we'll still talk more about it. Commute has grown as transport fares soars by 30.54%. And NPCL reduces pump price to 965 naira per litre. And away from that, we reviewed the newspaper front pages, opening the phone lines and having our analyst join us. Join us this morning for all these and more on Breakfast Central.
Welcome, and now let's bring you breakfast headlines. President Bola Tinubu on Monday insisted that there is no going back on the tax reform bills. The tax reform bills have generated controversy and met with opposition, especially from northern leaders who claimed that the bills aimed to impoverish the region. Addressing the matter during the presidential media chat in Lagos State, President Tinubu stated that the tax reform is here to stay. The reform is pro-poor and is meant to widen the tax net to ensure that more are paying tax. President Tinubu also ruled out any chance of his administration reversing the removal of subsidies or reducing the size of his cabinet. He also blamed organizers of events for the stampedes in which nearly 70 people died so far during the festive season. Now let's talk about the petrol pricing in the oil sector. We understand that the retail price of premium motor spirit, also known as PMS, also known as petrol, I beg your pardon, has dropped to 965 naira per litre in the Federal Capital Territory. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited effected the new price across its retail outlets in the capital city to the delight of customers. The new amount is the second price drop in less than 2 weeks from 1,060 naira earlier this month. At its mega station located along Wuse Zone 4 and Olusegun Obasanjo Way central area, the price of the commodity was sold at 965 naira per litre, with commuters scrambling to join the long queues. And now to security matters. The federal government has announced that Nigeria is now free of the Lakarawa terrorist group. Following a decisive military campaign that forced the group back into Mali, the declaration was made by the Minister of State for Defense, Bello Matawale, during a press briefing in Guso, Zamfara State. Speaking to journalists, Matawale emphasized that the group, which originated in Mali, no longer poses a threat on Nigerian soil. And now, moving away from Nigeria, Mozambique's Constitutional Council has declared Daniel Chapo, backed by Frelimo, the winner of the presidential election with 65.17% of the vote, succeeding Felipe Nyusi as president. Council President Lucia Ribeiro acknowledged irregularities, but stated that they did not impact the outcome. Venancio Monlane followed with 24.19%. Osufo Momade received 6.62% and Lufero Simango secured 4.02%. The announcement reaffirms the National Election Commission's earlier declaration, which had reported 70.67% for Chapo, that triggered 2 months of protests led by Monlane, resulting in 130 deaths during clashes with police. This election marked Mozambique's 7th presidential election, as outgoing President Felipe Nyusi steps down after 2 terms. And that's all on breakfast headlines. Let's now move back to Breakfast Central and get you into our top stories. I am Osaogie Ogbola.
Welcome back. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, has reduced the pump price of petrol at its retail outlets in Abuja to 965 naira per litre, down from the previous price of 1,030 naira per litre. News Central's correspondent Joshua Imari visited several NNPCL retail outlets in the nation's capital, Abuja, and unveils in this report.
For some residents of the Federal Capital Territory, the reduction in the pump price of premium motor spirit, commonly known as petrol, comes as a welcome news. During a visit to one of the retail outlets of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, residents expressed delight, saying that the lower price will help them save more money and ease their financial burden.
Well, it's a good development because it shows that our government, they are working. They are doing something at least to ameliorate the suffering of the masses. We are hoping for better things to come.
That is fine. I think it's a step forward. Though at a slow pace, yes. They will trust God and we believe that we will see more of it.
It has great effect on my budget. And it seems to be cheaper in the market now. Things are very expensive. So when there's reducing price, things will get better. And people will reduce their price. Transportation costs will be cheaper. So people will reduce their prices of goods. But with high costs on fuel price, transportation is very high, so people will increase their prices.
While some Nigerians have welcomed the recent reduction in the price of premium motor spirits, others say to whom much is given, much is expected, as other Nigerians are expecting a more reduction in the price of petrol across filling stations in Nigeria.
You know, we masses, we are the one facing it. You understand? It's not touching the big men. Even fuel per litre is 10,000 naira is not touching them. Because if you look at like me in my working place, how much be my salary?
As Nigerians share mixed reactions over the new price of petrol, some believe that stabilizing the price will greatly benefit citizens in the long run. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarai.
Thank you very much, Joshua Imarai, for that report. And, you know, that just sort of x-rays the thoughts and the hearts of Nigerians in this season regarding the reduction of pump price of petrol. I mean, there's still... I was a bit nervous yesterday on my way home because I saw queue at the filling station and I was already having palpitations. I was thinking, is there about to be another, you know, fuel scarcity situation here? Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's always going to be that panic, you know, mostly during Christmas. This is maybe one of the first times in a while that we've not had, you know, petrol scarcity during Christmas. So it's not something to celebrate. I don't want anyone to look at that and say, oh, you know, this is...
We are making progress.
It's not normal that we should have petrol scarcity in the first place. You know, so the fact that it's not happening is not something that we should celebrate. What we should be looking for is there should be a standard of life, and I would always say this: there should be a standard that we should place on our leadership. The standard and the quality of life that we want to live as Nigerians. Not when something bad doesn't happen, then we say, oh, well, you know, it means that we've made progress. No, that should not be the standard. The standard is that Nigerians should be able to afford petrol. The standard is that petrol should not be any of the things that Nigerians would ever lack. We would have to queue
My
for
dear, that standard that you are calling now, it's a very long call.
I get it, but so, my point is, let's not celebrate mediocrity on that level. You know, we should increase on the standards that we demand of governance. And yes, 965 sounds like a better price.
But look at where we're coming from.
1,060, But again, more questions need to be asked. And if anyone paid attention to the X space that we held yesterday, a place at the table yesterday evening, it featured some really, really brilliant minds in the petroleum, you know, oil and gas sector. And one of the questions that was raised was about the pricing, you know, for petrol in Nigeria. What exactly dictates that price? And we still don't have clear answers as to why Nigerians should pay 900 naira plus for a litre of petrol. There's still no definite answer, you know, that defends that price of petrol.
Especially because part of the argument was that they were removing subsidy, and the removal of subsidy was going to increase the cost of petrol. But many would argue that even this year, that there is definitely, they still had been paying subsidy, just called it a different name, shortfalls. Anyway, we'll move on to other conversations. As Christmas and New Year celebrations approach, many Nigerians have, of course, started, and families have started to complain about how much they are struggling to make the festivities memorable due to the rising cost of living and the economic hardship. Following many of our reports, traders have experienced low patronage in this season as families and communities are trying to cope with the difficult times. According to the Consumer Price Index report by the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, Nigerians are also grappling with a record high transport inflation rate of 30.54% in November 2024. Now we're looking at this story and what the implications are. And joining us is policy analyst and founder of TAF Africa, Dr. Jake Epele. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and compliments of the season to both of you.
Compliments of the season to you as well.
And to my very good friend, your managing director, Coyote.
Thank you very much. Compliments of the season to you as well. People don't feel that the season has been very complimentary, you know. Let's talk about the general sense of, you know, the general mood of Nigerians in this festive season. It would seem, or would you argue that in a long while, I don't know if we've been as depressed during the end of the year celebrations as we have been in 2024?
Well, this is an unusual times, you know, and a little bit of uncertainty taken into consideration. The high cost of food items, transportation, even the decrease in the fuel will not really mean anything. And I tend to agree with my very good friend who has a very analytical mind that we shouldn't be celebrating just because there's a price drop. And don't forget the fact that whenever there's these kind of price adjustment, it doesn't reflect on the adjustment of prices of food. The usual Nigerian way of doing things, once things goes up, it takes ages for those things to come down. So it's a not too pleasant period for Nigerians, taking into cognizance the harsh economic realities. But I want to also be optimistic that there are opportunities to have a very, very good celebration, void of the anxieties of the economic harshness. We can still have very good festive period. Take, for instance, what I'm doing. I'm taking some measures and to provide certain financial support for elders of my community. I have done a survey and was able to capture data of 250 elderlies, persons with disability, very vulnerable women in my locality, and I'm from Opobo Kingdom in River State.
I'm hoping that you're not doing this. You know, I'm hoping that you're not doing this, you know, publicly in terms of people coming in a crowd. You've seen the stampedes that have happened recently. You know, is that something that worries you as well? The fact that we've had tons of stampedes, about 3 stampedes recorded so far, and about 65 persons who have passed within the space of a week. And yesterday at the presidential media chat, the president talked about how, you know, this is the fault of the organizers, saying that if you don't have enough to give, you shouldn't publicize your giving so you don't have more people coming to overflood that. So, you know, is that a concern you have, the stampede, and, you know, is that a challenge that you're maybe experiencing as you're doing this kind acts?
Yeah, you know, I have taken that into cognizance and into consideration, and I have also re-strategized. Instead of bringing together these 250 individuals that we are targeting, I'm going to be going to their homes with my team, one after the other. Well, in Opobo Kingdom, we're very communal, so we live in compounds, you know, and so my strategy is to go to those compounds individually, meet with the people that I want to help, and this help is not coming only from my pocket. I have friends across the country, and we put together resources, and we're going to be taking these resources to these individuals. And so for me, the issue of gathering people and all that, we can re-strategize, meet people in smaller group, meet people individually, take things to their homes and drop and share quietly without really making noise. Sometimes the problem is when you gather people and they congregate, you're not able to handle the crowd. Yeah, the president may be right, the organizers have some problems, but the greatest pointer to this is the economic harsh realities that we are facing. People are hungry. So whenever you are out there trying to distribute something, they will literally rush to get those things. So it's not necessarily because the organizers are not organized enough, but I think it is because the people are hungry, and when they find that opportunity to get some material benefits or money or rights or whatever that anyone is distributing, they will rush those things. So oftentimes, those who wants to provide intervention goes there having in mind that, well, I'm just going to cater for 1,000 people, only for them to see that there are 5,000 waiting for the ration of 1,000 people. So the blame is not necessarily, sometimes absolutely, on the organizers, but on the economic downturn that we are facing that is very adverse, and the most marginalized are facing the pain much more.
Yeah, Mr. Bella, one of the core reasons, you know, we are finding this level of desperation in Christmas season is because of the inflation that has, you know, hit Nigerians in the last 1 year, or maybe even more. The president has a very ambitious plan of reducing inflation to about 15%. You know, it currently is stated to be above 30%. Many people argue that it's way above even that 30%, that 37% that is being stated. Do you believe that it is possible that Mr. President, with the plans that he has currently and the way that the government has been run in the last 18 to 20 months, can achieve 15% inflation?
Well, there's nothing wrong in anybody setting target, but I don't know what the timeline is. Did he say he's going to achieve this in a record time of 1 year, in 3 months? Whatever the timeline is, the reality right now makes that it looks like an economic elementary school economics. You know, it might be very difficult for anyone to achieve that, even in Q1 as we step into 2025. It will be a Herculean task for an economy that they haven't been able to really find a physical policy direction. The tumbling of the naira against dollar does not give us any glimmer of hope. The inability to stabilize the dollar and the naira market is not going to give us any hope to believe what we're hearing. And so I think there's a need for government to retool their economic strategy, to face the realities that the common men in the street are struggling and will struggle for some time. There's a need for us to come out with economic blueprints that would deliver this country from the downturn that we're experiencing. Let's not give people false hope. There's a need to inject confidence and hope in the people, but I don't believe that we should give them false hope. And so for me, those numbers are not, they don't seem to be very realistic. And if you take into consideration what the common man, what people in the street are going through, I mean, it was amazing that the queen of my community, when she was here in Abuja, gave me a report of how girls, young girls, are beginning to take their mother's old wrapper and using it as sanitary towel, you know. And I had to put together some funds and send to her to just buy sanitary towels and distribute free of charge to these people. I mean, the situation is much more than anybody can perceive in Aso Rock. It's much more than anybody can perceive from the government house. You know, have you ever gone to some of these governors and even at the presidency, the type of breakfast that they roll out, and how many of them don't even finish those breakfasts at the end of the day? They don't feel what we feel. They don't know what we're going through. They don't know that right now it's very difficult for any father, any mother to go out there and buy common clothes, second-hand clothes for their children. They are looking for what to eat. It is very troubling. And then coming out with economic hope that does not translate to what happens in the street of Nigerians. I don't buy that.
Right. I mean, you paint a realistic picture of what it is, and thank you for sharing, you know, the example from your queen. Reports have it, as at February, the reports were that 37 million Nigerian women were experiencing period poverty. As a working woman myself, I find how ridiculously expensive it is to buy the sanitary product. So I imagine what it is like for the average Nigerian, for the women who are in the IDP camp. Yesterday, the president had a media chat, and, you know, part of the conversations were that he doesn't regret removing fuel subsidy, and it was a very tough decision. as a leader, you need to be able to make tough decisions. He was being asked if he probably thought he should have faced it and done it in batches. Of course, he didn't. He believes that the way in which he's carried it out is a better option. Do you agree with the president's response to that? It feels like it's an overflogged horse, the conversation about subsidy, but we cannot take away the fact that our economy started to take a different shape when he took out subsidy and merged the unification of the exchange rate. So do you agree with the president's response, and do you think that media chat inspired hope?
Well, I am a supporter and a proponent of subsidy removal. The only problem I have with the narrative around subsidy removal is whether anyone is telling us the truth first, that subsidy has actually been removed. It's very troubling when there are counter narratives, even within the government officials. One person says the subsidy has been removed, and then the next minute, someone that is as high, excuse me, in the office of governance will tell us that subsidies have not been removed and that they are still paying subsidies to certain people. That's very troubling. The greatest asset of every leader, of every president, is the fact that once you say something, it is believable, it is credible, people can run with it. But a situation where there's good back and forth, it's very concerning. And so if truly the subsidies are being removed and it is meant to cushion the effect of the downtrodden, the hardship that the common man in the street of Nigeria are going through, then we should see it, in reality. We should see that it has been able to bring down the price of commodities. It has been able to provide access to quality health, the access to quality education, access to social services, the provision of simple daily needs of the people, and when we are not seeing that, and rather we are seeing a skyrocketing economic trend, then it leaves everybody to wonder whether truly and really the subsidies have been removed, and if they have been removed, where is the money going to? I'm not an investigative journalist like yourselves, but I think that there are still some people who are benefiting from the subsidy money.
Yeah. Even if not just subsidy, there's obviously still some level of corruption that goes on in the oil and gas sector that still must be uncovered. The procurement fraud, as it is called, in the oil and gas sector and in many other sectors in Nigeria is still very, very, very much active. So, it may not be because we're paying subsidy, but there's definitely a lot of leakages. But there's some other thing that the president spoke about. He spoke about a friend of, I'm not sure if this is a real story, but he mentioned a friend of his that, used to have 5 Rolls-Royce, vehicles, but now drives a Honda. I think it was one of the things that he mentioned in the media chat. So when we hear stories like that, are we meant to celebrate that? Are we meant to interpret that as that Nigerians are now being realistic with the economy and cutting down to a reasonable way of living? Or is that meant to be interpreted as a clear sign that the economy has completely fallen and broken, people's backs across the country? What is the mentality, that we should, understand that type of analysis? That a person used to have 5 Rolls-Royce, but now, drives a Honda. Honda's not a bad car, by the way.
That's very funny. It's very funny and very funny analysis and an example too. I would have been more comfortable if the president is saying to me, to Nigerians, is that look, I used to go with 20 convoy vehicles that will run fuels of taxpayers' money. I have reduced it to 5. I would have been very comfortable if the president is saying to us that, look, I've decided that I'm going to some sort of cut down government spending, in order to save money. And I've discovered loopholes, and I'm going to ensure that those loopholes are taken care of. I think I would have been very much comfortable if he's saying that, look, I want to leave, as an exemplary leader by saying I'm going to cut my pay into 50%, and I've told all the ministers working in my cabinet to cut their pay by 50%. I would have been much more comfortable if he gives strict instruction to ministers and government officials who are traveling that you can no longer travel the way you used to travel. I'm going to make sure that you get less extra code. Using as an individual that was driving 5 Rolls Royces and now he's driving a Honda, who is this individual? It could also be a figment of his imagination, So it's not a good example. It doesn't show that Nigerians, you're literally saying that Nigerians are adjusting, but you are not adjusting. I find that very, very laughable. I'm sorry to say that.
All right, Jake Bola, thank you very much for spending your morning with us. Thanks for your time. We look forward to more conversations with you, and of course, wish you the very best of the Christmas season.
Thank you so much, and you guys have a swell time, and keep hoping for the best, Nigerians. It's time to, restructure. This year, for the first time, I don't have Christmas decoration in my house. I would rather save that money and give it to people that can't afford to eat.
That's very noble.
And so we need to adjust, but we need to be hopeful.
Thank you very much for doing that. Really noble of you. We hope more Nigerians will rise up to the occasion to look out for one another. Thank you for your time with us. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
All right. Now, moving on, after persistent calls from Nigerians for the #1 citizen to address the public, yesterday marked a turning point. In a media chat with journalists here in Lagos, President Bola Tinubu addressed key issues bothering citizens since he took office. The president said that he is fighting corruption by reviewing a new minimum wage, also stopping benefactors from feeding fat on fuel subsidies. Also, he spoke about introducing the student loans and so on.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu also spoke on the controversial tax reforms, stating that it is here to stay. He also aired his views on the current economy, seeking for more time, while noting that his administration has just been in power for 18 months. Now, joining us to review the impact of the president's speech is our co-anchor, producer of Breakfast Central, Joe Hansen, who followed the live broadcast yesterday. And we're also going to be joined by Jide Benson, a public affairs analyst. Good morning, and thanks to you both.
Good morning.
Okay.
Morning, Sarge. Morning, Jide.
So very well. So just before we, have you share your thoughts on, what happened yesterday, let's quickly hear from the president and see some of the things that he said.
Foodstuffs, commodities, and clothing envelopes and body law for the last 25 years. I've never experienced this kind of incident because we are organized, clean to discipline, and if you know you don't have enough to give, don't attempt to even publicize it. It's the question. No, every society, even in America, they have food bank. They have hungry people. In Britain, they have food bank. they have warehouses, they are organized. They take token to be in line and take turns to, to collect. It's unfortunate. We just have to. It's a reflection in our bus stops where we don't even want to be on queue. We rush into the vehicle.
Oh, well, very interesting media chat there by Mr. President. Good morning once again, Joe Hansen and Judy Benson. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Good morning.
All right. I'm going to start with, let's start with Joe Hansen. Your quick, thoughts on the speech in general. Were there any things that stood out for you?
Yes, Osawage, I think I'm going to pick three things that stood out. The first is that the president has eventually quelled worries by Nigerians, asking when he's going to address the nation. We do recall that before the elections, there were numerous requests for the president to address the nation via a debate or to speak with journalists, which we know he outrightly declined, especially with his camp. But this happens to be the first, and I think he scores some good points for actually coming out to eventually speak to Nigerians. Nobody expected it's going to happen, or it was going to happen, and then all of a sudden, there came the press release, and he spoke to Nigerians. I think that's a positive. That's one. Secondly, we must also give kudos to the fact that the president says that there's no longer borrowing from the CBN by ways of through the ways and means. So he said in the past 3 months, they've been able to finance the budget without going to the ways and means. Although critics have said this is a bit, not too positive, because if you recall, President Muhammadu Buhari's tenure, his entire 8 tenure, he only borrowed 30 trillion naira from ways and means from the CBN. But President Tinubu, in his first quarter of 2024, already borrowed 71 trillion naira, which has indeed risen the debt profile of Nigeria. So it's neither here nor there on that statement. Thirdly, I also think that one of the key things that he said is the fact that they're also looking forward to ensure that the tax reform bills are here to stay. I think those are the three takeouts for me in the entire conversation.
All right, thank you for sharing those. Let's now bring in Jide Benson and get your thoughts. Were there any key takeaways? Let's start with the positives that you think the speech may have highlighted for you, or the chat.
Well, the first positive is that he spoke to Nigerians, so that's a good one. What's the other second positive now? That at least Nigerians can drive along the Abuja, Kaduna, Kafanchan road. That's something that's quite cheering. And then the last thing was that he thanks Nigerians. He didn't take Nigerians for granted. But on a scale of positive to negative, I'm not sure that there were more positives than negatives.
Okay.
Right. I mean, so what are the negatives that you can point out? And I'm asking once again about the 5 Rolls-Royce analogy. Where he said that he had a friend who used to have 5 Rolls-Royce, but he now drives a Honda. I don't know if I don't know what exactly that analogy means. If it means that poverty has now become, so entrenched across the country that people can no longer, live a very basic life, or that, people are now then cutting down to size and being realistic and not being extravagant with their, with their cost of, with their, style of living.
That for me came across as the president boasting that I have made even the rich poor. Because if you're saying that somebody who had about 5 Rolls Royces can no longer afford to drive them comfortably, I mean, that's not something to be proud of. What you should be proud of is that you're saying that you have made an economy such that more people can afford to buy Rolls Royces. The other point about the size of his cabinet, he sort of boasted that everybody in that cabinet was working, and I don't think so. There are ministers who we haven't heard of. I mean, when the small rejig of his cabinet happened some months ago, I think that people expected a few more people to be shown the exit. Yes, there was some rejigging, but a lot more needs to be done. The size of government that he talked about needs to be reduced, and he's the best person who can demonstrate that. You don't need, there are certain ministries that probably are not needed. There are probably some ministries that don't need a minister of state because each ministry has a permanent secretary. Some ministries have 2 permanent secretaries, and all of them have directors and assistant directors. So whatever it is that the president needs to achieve in any sector of the economy, it doesn't have to be achieved by having an over-bloated cabinet. So that for me was a concern. On the issue of him scoring himself when Maokwe asked, well, it was a two-way thing. I think that he should have allowed Nigerians to assess him again. And the third point is about him continuing to dwell on the point that he has only spent 18 months in office. You are almost at your 50% mark. So that appears to be continuing to asking for patience on behalf of Nigerians. And Nigerians and human beings altogether are almost perpetually impatient. You said you were going to hit the ground running. When you hit the ground running, it was more about negatives and negatives. And I also do not agree that the two things that have brought us to where we are today, the issue of petrol subsidy and floating of the exchange rate, should have happened at about the same time.
Okay. I also just want to quickly follow up, with that. There were criticism that we saw online about the fact that when he had asked the journalist that name one minister that isn't working. So you've talked about certain ministries, that maybe need to be revisited. So from your perspective, are there ministers that you think that shouldn't be on the cabinet if they're going to do a review?
Minister of Marine and Blue Ocean Economy, or I can't remember how it's called now, but I'm not sure that anything for the potentials that Nigeria has because of its waterways, the potentials that the amount of revenue that we can generate, I don't think we have a person who is active enough to be able to optimize, not to talk about maximizing the potentials of that sector. I'm not sure that I've heard much about in the Ministry of Environment. I don't know what they happen to be doing there. So there's still a need for the special advisor to the president on policy coordination to assess what the ministers are doing.
Yeah. All right, Johansson, I think you should also chip in here on some of the other critical things that he spoke about. Aside rating himself, by himself, he also spoke about reducing his, no need to reduce his cabinet. From what you've seen from Nigerians commenting on this media chat, do a lot of people agree with that? The idea of keeping the cabinet the way it is because everybody is relevant in some way or the other?
Absolutely. Well, if you check what Nigerians are saying, it obviously shows that Nigerians are not in any way accepting that statement made by the president, where he said that he would not in any way touch his cabinet because he feels that all of them are working. Now, granted, while that statement was being made, I quickly rushed to the social media space, and I did see some Nigerians retweet in time what the president is saying. Now, a lot of people disagreed with that because they felt that it's still a case of telling Nigerians, which we all know, tighten your belts, but I wouldn't do the same. Now, that's one. Another key indicator for me in the entire conversation, which may have proven to be not too positive, is the fact of the FDIs. When he was asked about the foreign direct investment, the president had said that in order for him to attract more investors, it is the reason why he is traveling. That's one. Two, he said he's selling Nigeria so that people can come in and invest in Nigeria. And one way he said he was going to do this is that he's going to offer tax incentives, pay incentives. This means that companies who come in would, of course, have a good environment to do business. But the key question many were asking still is, if you were selling Nigeria, what happened to the companies that have left Nigeria? Why couldn't we at first hold on to these companies or grant them the same tax incentive so that they would not leave? So it's a case of saying, I'm going to do A, but then again, somehow, some way, B is happening in your own country. That's one. There's also the situation that also had to do with the fact of importing or having 2,000 tractors coming into the country to improve mechanized farming, because he said in his statements that the old way of farming shouldn't be looked at anymore. He's going to ensure that it's gone. Mechanized farming is a new thing to put in place. But there's also a question, if you recall, as journalists, the president, before he got into office, had mentioned that he's going to provide hectares of land and food to be provided and produced so that Nigerians would not lack any. But this is not the situation of things as we speak. So many are saying he should have actually touched on the current issues in line with the solutions rather than just speak rather on the surface.
Okay, let's talk about his thoughts regarding insecurity. He expressed a lot of optimism regarding Nigeria's security architecture. I'm going to have Joe answer first, and then I'll have Jide Benson answer. Joe, because I know you're in the hospitality sector, the president did talk about how he remembered during his campaign he had to pause visits to certain parts of the country because of insecurity. I'm going to quote him. He says, "It is very, very unfortunate that for 2 decades we witnessed wanton killings. I remember when I had to pause my campaign to pay condolence visits to Maiduguri, Katsina, Kaduna, and Kogi. Today you can travel these roads which were once impossible. It took one incident to disrupt an organized environment." So from what you've seen, Joe, in the hospitality sector, have you seen people feeling more confident about taking road travel? And after you answer, I'll have Jide Benson as well react to Nigeria's insecurity status.
To be honest, Olive, we must admit that there has been a sign or a level of improvement, especially in road transportation. And why we say this is because we still see a lot of persons travel via the road. Reports has it that there's a form of sane or sanity on these roads. However, we must also be honest that there's still lack of trust, especially from Nigerians. That's why we did see a video of a huge number of persons fighting to get on board a flight so that they can make it to the next state, regardless of the fact that the prices were very high, 300,000 from here to the east, because Nigerians are still a bit skeptical of using the road. So when it comes to security, I think there's still more to be done. However, he had mentioned that the budget that was put in place, especially looking at the fiscal year 2025, he will ensure that it is used for the security forces, and he did say that they should be commended. So this would not be able to be proven until we see the implementation in 2025, and then Nigerians can confidently come out to say truly that the roads are very safe. But for now, it's neither here nor there, as some Nigerians have decided to stay away from using the roads, but rather would use air.
Yeah, all right. I think
I wanted to depend
quickly,
Nigeria's insecurity status.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been marked improvements in the security sector, at least from our recent past, where we had somebody who was completely aloof, in my estimation. But what the president failed to do was to place culpability where it was. So he tactically extended the period of insecurity, saying Nigeria has been insecure for a period of about 20 years. I think that the worst time that we had was in the last before him, maybe the 8 or 9 years before him. So trying to exonerate President Buhari for the state of the economy was something he did quite tactically. But to bring it to today, there's been marked improvement. At least I follow a bit of what the armed forces are doing. And one should ensure that the Lakurawa people don't have a breathing space at all.
Yeah. All right. I mean, he also, I mean, in his responses rather, said that we're currently doing things different. At least that's the idea that he tried to sell. I have argued completely, against that, and I've said that it doesn't seem like anything different is being done. What we really have is a different set of people handling, those positions and doing things the same way. And if we hope to see an improved Nigeria, a better Nigeria, a different way of doing things, then, there has to be a completely different approach. Jide Benson, do you think that we are doing things different today as a country?
It depends on what side of the stage, and let me use the word stage, where you're standing from. And I would say yes, yes, and yes, things are being done different. And I'll explain why I say yes 3 times. Yes, because one, the National Assembly is doing things differently. They're passing, in short, there's no longer, they don't spend so much time in debates and so on. We did see an example of when the swearing of the ministers and appointees and so on, it didn't take long. They were just being reviewed immediately and so on. We're also seeing a change in the National Assembly that has gotten a lot of Nigerians talking that how is it that, we remember the emails will be sent to the inboxes, the conversations of anywhere you see food you must eat. I'm talking about the Senate President, the force in which the senators are put in to ensure that some of the requests are being made and passed ASAP. We've seen these things take place. So it's quite different from the other one that we saw, the 9th Assembly, We've also seen things done differently in the sense that there is a tax reform bill. This is quite different because we've seen some forces fighting against it, ensuring that it does not happen. But like we heard from the president, he said it will happen. And we've seen this tax reform bills, what it would do to Nigerians, what it would do to Nigeria. Hopefully, I dare say that it could be the president's biggest success if it is implemented accordingly. So for me, these two things are different, in addition to other things that we've seen, quite different from the past 8 years that we didn't see a lot of implementations, apart from that which had to do with the electoral reform, which was very good, and extra things that were equally as done as well.
Yeah. Judy Benson, same question to you. Are we doing things different in Nigeria today?
Osarage, like I said, it depends on where you're starting from.
I want Judy Benson to answer this one.
Yeah, to the extent that the amount of money that we're using to service our debts has reduced, that's something quite different. The president referenced Kaduna State having one of the largest deposits of lithium. One would have expected that in one of his many globetrotting moves to woo investors, he would have given conditions that, look, for us to buy vehicles from vehicle manufacturers, would only be patronizing you if those cars are assembled in Nigeria. So that's something that can also be done differently. The president's side, the issue of tax, I think that there should be more what do you call it? All of these town hall meetings that are happening now, those are things that should have happened before that thing was sent to the National Assembly. So on the issue of communication and engagement, I don't think that we're doing things differently. All of what is happening now is because of the opposition that the tax reform bills have met. The attempt to increase VAT to 10% is something that has also stirred a lot of controversy. So if there had been a lot of engagements before now, the raw costs that we're currently having over some of these reform policies would not have been in place. So there's still a lot of things that there's still a lot of things that can be done to demonstrate that we're doing things quite differently.
Judy Benson, another question would be, are there key areas that you hoped would have been addressed in this media chat that were not addressed?
Well, to the extent that the journalists often have to walk on eggshells, I'm not sure that there was anything. I'm not sure that there was anything that they didn't address. But I don't think that there was any talk on foreign policy. The issue of maybe ECOWAS and the Sahel states. There's going to be a new president in the U.S. in a few weeks. Nigeria-U.S. relations is something that maybe should have come up. There's still under foreign policy, the back and forth between the leader of the Conservative Party and Nigerian people altogether because of our Nigerian ancestry. So if there had been talks about foreign policy, I suspect that Nigeria-British, Nigeria-American relationships will have come to the fore. And the president leading ECOWAS, I think that that's also something that will have come to the fore. So yeah, foreign policy and foreign relations was something that they didn't talk about, and I think that should have been part of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Joe, in 30 seconds, do you have anyone that should have stood out as well? I think I should have asked
Corruption.
Okay.
Corruption. Right. I think the president let out corruption. I think the answer wasn't well-rounded. He had said that the only way he's stopping corruption is to ensure that salaries are paid. He reviews the judiciary salary, the salaries, the school loans, and so on. I think there should have been a more clearer explanation as to how corruption would be stopped. And also judiciary reform. I was expecting to hear about the judiciary reform, especially looking at the case of Yahaya Bello, and not forgetting to Chief Afe Babalola, and of course, not forgetting to the case of other state governors, talking about River State and the like. So we're expecting that he would have dealt with how corruption would be handled. But if you look at the answer, it was a clear statement saying that, listen, like he said, corruption has started even before he came in. Hence, he's just going to provide these other things, and hopefully it will help stem and stop corruption.
Joe Hansen, Judy Benson, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time with us this morning.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be discussing more about the presidential media chat with our next guest, Ikechukwu Amechi, who's already in the studio. But let's share with you a recap of the conversations we've had this morning and let you know what's coming up next. This morning on Breakfast Central, President Tinubu holds first media chat with journalists, and we've been exploring the conversations that have been had, and we're pretty sure it will make the newspaper front pages. Nigerians lament high cost of living amid Yuletide celebration. Dr. J.K. Pele joined us for that conversation. And NPCL reduces pump price to 965 naira per litre. And now let's share with you what's coming up next.
Coming up next, NSCDC activates emergency centers to combat Lassa fever, and also newspaper front pages. The major stories making headlines across Nigeria this morning. Also, what Nigerians are saying. Welcome once again. Now let's take you through the newspapers this morning and share with you the major stories making headlines across Nigeria. Joining us is the publisher of the niche newspaper, Ikechukwu Amechi. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, sir. It's always my pleasure. How are you doing today?
Very well, very well. It's a day to Christmas, and of course, Nigeria is, well, it's maybe not the most exciting place to spend Christmas because of the economy.
Well, but the president thinks otherwise.
Yeah, so I think it's great. Before we start with your views on the media chat, let's first of all share what's going on the Punch newspaper this morning, where we're starting. The big story there says, no regrets removing subsidy, tax reforms will go ahead, says Tinubu. Tax reforms to end colonial base assumptions, no plans to downsize cabinet. PDP tackles Okpewolo over local government chairman suspension, 935 naira per litre petrol. Labour faults new price, demands further reduction. And also, federal government rolls out 708 vehicles today as it halves fares. Budget, federal government prosecutes terrorists with 780 million naira. SSAs get 2 billion naira vehicles. NCDC activates emergency centers as Lassa fever surges. And also, NAPTIP reunites 1,200 traffic victims with families. Those are the big ones on the Punch this morning. And now to the Nigerian Tribune. Tax reforms have come to stay, says Mr. President. Says government is open to consultations. I have no regrets removing subsidy. He insists. Economic management team on the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Economic management team alerted on food crisis in 31 states. Charts calls for stability and growth. 2025 budget. Federal government to establish ranches in Lagos, Ogun, Imo State, and others. And also, federal government commences 50% discount transportation palliative for 144 routes across Nigeria today. Office of the SSA to the President on livestock development to transform livestock sector in collaboration with real people concept. Not sure what that is about. But first of all, let's go straight to it, and first of all, get your thoughts on the media chats. Some of the things that he said, have made the headlines this morning, like the no regrets removing subsidy, and of course, he has no plans to downsize his cabinet, tax reforms to go ahead, and some other things.
Well, I watched the media chat yesterday from the beginning until it ended. For me, I think it is good that the president, after 18 months, decided finally to have the media chat. It's a good thing. But then, look, part of the responsibilities of leadership is to inspire hope, to give people the confidence that things are going to be better. I'm not too sure there was any Nigerian that came out from that discussion yesterday that had the renewed hope of saying that tomorrow is going to be better than today, despite all that the president said. The president simply doubled down on his policies, on his programs, which unfortunately, no matter how much they try to disagree, those policies are directly responsible for the level of poverty we have in this country today. The removal of subsidy, the floating of the naira at the same time, the devaluation of our national currency, those things are responsible for the level of poverty we have in the country today.
Yeah.
The level of poverty that has made it expedient for people to go out there to scramble anytime somebody says, come, I have food for you. Look, I also watched him yesterday. He was trying to deflect from the criticisms of people who say, look, the 60-something people that died within 1 week scrambling for food was as a result of the level of poverty in the country. He was trying to say, no, it is because of the lack of organization of the people who organize those things, that he has been given palliatives from his Bodilon house for several years, and that he has, why that may be true. The truth of the matter also is that the man in Okija has also been given palliatives every Christmas, and we've not had this kind of
Obi Jackson
tragedy. A situation, also, where people are told to come and get palliatives in the morning, and people leave their homes 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something is pursuing them. And what is pursuing them is hunger. And the president does not seem to have a clue how to begin to reduce this hunger in the land. The first time he came to Lagos after his swearing in, he was going to mosque. People lined up the streets and said, "Ebibami, we are hungry." The protest that has been organized in this country was a protest, a hunger protest, which of course they misconstrued and said it was an attempt to overthrow his government. So I didn't come out from that exercise yesterday with a feeling that, look, we have a president who empathizes with the sufferings of Nigerians. And what answer did he give? He said he was not going to cut down on his overbloated cabinet. Yet he's talking about reduction in the cost of governance. How? Some of those ministries that he said are essential and efficient, we can do without them. Even the one that he specifically mentioned, the Ministry of Livestock. Livestock has always been a department in the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes.
It is like having a Minister of table tennis, a Minister of lawn tennis, a Minister of football.
Under the Ministry of Sports.
Under the Ministry of Sports. Or
separate from the Ministry of Sports.
Separate from the Ministry of Sports. When we already have a Minister of Sports, we are going to create a Minister of Football.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? So, I think that, you know, he came out with the impression yesterday that Nigerians are perhaps too extravagant, that they live their life. What of Mr. President? Haven't we seen countries where presidents also live a lifestyle
prudent,
that is prudent, a lifestyle that agrees with the times? Is it what President Tinubu is doing? Go and check his convoy. He's buying yachts. He's buying new aircraft. Even if they say it's a second hand, they are building and renovating presidential lodges. Is that had to be prudent? Yet you expect the people, you say if they can't pay for the electricity, they should switch off. So he didn't come across yesterday as somebody who has empathy. He came out as an emperor, somebody who has conquered Nigeria, and therefore he continues to claim about his mandate. Let us even give it to him that he has a mandate from the people. But he won only 33% of the votes cast. So it's not an absolute mandate. And he cannot continue riding roughshod on Nigerians who are saying the sense of governance is for the good of the people. You can't continue doing what you are doing, even when the people are saying, take your knees off our neck. Your policies are killing us, and you are doubling down and saying, okay, sir, what answer did he give to the issue of the corruption?
He also spoke about increasing minimum wage to 70,000 naira.
And how is that a way of fighting corruption? And like I said, the president has spoken. It is good. He granted that interview. We wish we would see more of that, but there was nothing that inspired hope yesterday from what he said.
Well, I mean, it's really a sad realization. You know, I think the positive angle to that would be the fact that this media chat happened in the first place, because there had been calls for this media chat for the longest time, you know, and people had been asking that the president should speak to Nigerians, and now he's finally spoken to Nigerians. Maybe some people aren't pleased, although if you go on social media, you see mixed reactions. But I wanted us to, you know, look at some other stories. We'll come back to looking at the, you know, president's media chat. Okay, it just looks like the whole paper is really, everything is talking about the media chat. But let's talk about federal government commencing 50% discount transportation palliative for 144 routes across Nigeria starting today. Is that something to be excited about?
Well, for those who are going to benefit, yes, why not? Because a cousin of mine called me that lives in Abuja, was traveling home. I think that was last week. He called me from the bus stop and said they were paying 60,500 naira to travel on road. From Lagos to the east, I think it's about 40 to 50,000 now. It may get worse as we...
that used to be the price of a return ticket.
Exactly, as we move on. So things are terribly bad. And, you know, the irony of the situation is that even while prices of everything are going up, the money is not even there. The money is not there. So it is double jeopardy for a lot of Nigerians. Yeah. So any kind of succor, any kind of relief that comes their way, people will appreciate it. So it is a temporary relief measure. I don't have anything against it. But at the end of the day, you know, all these palliatives, we've seen how far the rice has gone in solving the hunger problem in the land. There was a time, anything you do, they throw rice at you. Mm-hmm. Anything, they throw rice at you. People are still hungry. Yeah. So even if you provide provide 700 buses, half the transport fare, 140 rules, at the end of the day, after Christmas, the problem still lingers. There are fundamental problems in the physical programs of the government. And unless you go back to those issues, to address those policies that threw us into this mess, it will be difficult to see how handouts, now palliatives, are going to pull us out of this mess that we are in.
It actually never does. I mean, the idea behind palliatives, is meant to ease the strain, on citizens, but in reality, at least in the Nigerian case, it never really, really does. I don't know that one or a few cups of rice in a small polythene bag is going to ease anyone suffering in Nigeria, because
it cannot.
Except you're bringing it with a pot of stew.
Even the so-called cash transfers.
Yeah, that didn't work either.
Even if it works, giving a family 20,000 or whatever, how can it solve any problem?
Yeah. Okay. Let's also talk about something else. On the top left of the punch, 935 naira per litre. Labour faults new price, demands further reduction. High fuel price, major contributor to hardship, says the NLC. The Dangote refinery, of course, declared that it had reduced its price, I think, to 899 naira per litre. And NPC, of course, according to the news reports that we have, is currently said 965, 975 in petrol stations in the Federal Capital Territory. I'm guessing it's going to be across the country. Is this, a thing that Nigerians should be happy about, that there seems to be now, some market forces that are causing the price of petrol to reduce?
Market forces is a price actually reducing also. We have very short memory in this country, and that's why our leaders treat us the way they treat us, without not caring. What was the price of petrol May 29, 2023? Can you still remember? So now everybody's dancing that it has come down from 1,300 to this thing, because the importers are still importing. Because at the end of the day, the petrol they import sells cheaper than the one produced locally by Dangote. That's why Dangote is now coming down and all that. By the time they find a middle ground, these things will go up again. As long as you subject your energy policies to market forces, nothing. Energy subsidy, go anywhere in the world. Even the developed economies that run IMF and World Bank that are telling you there should be no subsidies, they subsidize. But they are telling third world countries not to. And tell me any third world country that has adhered to the Bretton Woods economic conventions that has come out stronger economically. So Nigerians should enjoy it if it is actually something to celebrate. Because last year, a litre of petrol was not selling even up to 300 naira. So if today we are celebrating 930, so be it. But like I said earlier, any little thing that can help to cushion, to solve the problems, because Nigerians are really suffering. Nigerians are really going through hell. So anything that can help to mitigate the level of suffering we have in the country, I'm not against it. So if what we are seeing now, petrol, in any case, if you drive down to the filling stations, I've not seen any petrol station selling fuel as we speak at the prices that we read on the pages of newspapers. But let us hope that it is really coming down. But there's no way the people who are operating this market that I know won't allow anything to go down. There will be a point it will get, they will come to an agreement. And this so-called price war will stop.
All right. Let's take this call. We have Williams calling from Abuja. Good morning, Williams. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Olive. Merry Christmas.
Morning, Williams.
I have to talk about the presidential media chat of last night. And I think I have one take-home. And the take-home is that we're talking about the hunger in the land. And for the president, when he was asked last night to talk about inflation, he mentioned that he was going to use agriculture to bring down inflation. I'm very sorry, Mr. President, with all due respect, you are trying, but the call is wrong. If you want to use agriculture at less than 0.5% of our budget this year, less than $1 trillion, while other ministries got about 10 ministries got over $1 trillion. And agriculture that we said we want to use to fight hunger, we want to use it to fight inflation, is getting less than $1 trillion. I don't think we are ready to use agriculture. The president is a mouth saying, but the intentions are not there. So I'm sorry to say it, because there is no any plan to make things to work further. If we are really serious, the speaker was trying to remind us of the 2,000 tractors since 2022. Till today, we've not gotten one. So the truth is this. The intentions may be there, but I don't think, the plan may be there, but there are no intentions to back it up. So until there is action to back it up, I don't think we really want to use agriculture to help this nation.
All right.
Thank you. Do have a wonderful week.
Thank you very much, William, for highlighting that.
Yeah, he was speaking about reducing or hopefully reducing inflation to 15% in the 2025 budget. And other things, and of course the fight against corruption as well.
I want to look for some good news because it seems like we've had a lot of, as we usually do, a lot of bad news. NAPTIP reunites 1,200 trafficked victims with families. I don't think that we pay as much attention to trafficking as we should. So, I mean, your thoughts on this? It seems like it is. No, it definitely is good news.
Well, the NAPTIP is one of the agencies of government that, if you ask me, I would say they are doing a good job. Because this issue of trafficking, particularly when it comes to children, I think it is a very terrible thing that if we are reuniting 1,000, you said, people with their families, that will also tell you how bad the situation is. So it's a good thing, but it is the tip of the iceberg. So there's so much also going wrong there. Look, Olive, you're talking about looking for good news. You can't invent good news. You can't invent good news. How do you get good news in a country where 60-something people died while struggling to get something to eat? There was this woman in Abuja that was rescued with a 3-year-old son from the Catholic Church tragedy. And the interview she granted, what did she say? She said, I thank God that we were rescued, but where are we going to get our next meal? Where are we going to get our next meal? Any other country where these tragedies, the president should have even declared a national day of mourning. 60-something citizens dying in circumstances such as this. And look, there's no guarantee that it won't happen again.
Yeah.
Because hunger takes away human dignity. Olive, there is no butter. You can't go there to scramble for food. Anybody who does that has been pushed to the wall. People talk about greed. It is not greed. It is that when you are not sure of where the next meal is going to come from,
you have to fight for the one that is, is possible.
You fight for it. And when you know that if you don't get it, you don't even know when next. People are dying. People are starving in this country. So there is no good news that I can think of right now. When onions, 1,000 naira per one, no now, no. Yeah. So it is, we love Nigeria. And I told a friend the other day that I would rather President Tinubu succeeds. Because if he succeeds, Nigeria is better for it. Those of us who have decided that we are not going to Japa will also be better off. But that does not mean that you want him to succeed. The part of wanting him to succeed is to also tell him the truth, that things are not moving well. You can't govern by propaganda. No, you can't. This is a government that came into office using propaganda, but you can use propaganda to get into office. You can't use it to govern.
Right.
Because the results will be there for everybody to see. The president should climb down from his high horse, come down from his high horse, roll up his sleeves, and face the reality that his policies are impoverishing the people more. And the essence of government is the welfare and well-being and security of the people. Nigerians are not getting it. So the government is failing in its responsibilities.
I think that's a sentiment that a number of people would agree with, because I think to wrap this up, I would say that when you're asking, and this is something we've said over and over again on the show, when you're asking people to endure, people have to see that you're enduring as well as the leader. And you can't be saying that you're not going to cut down on your cabinet, yet you're telling Nigerian citizens that this is just the birth pangs. Aptly described Labour. Yesterday at some point he said it over and over again. I had to check that my phone wasn't hanging, because he was saying, this is the Labour period, and eventually it would yield results. But Nigerians may not agree with that. There are some who do. We'll see the ones who agree and the ones that don't when we look shortly at what Nigerians are saying. But Ikechukwu, thank you for your time, as always. It's always a pleasure to have you. Hopefully at the next media chat, we'll have you representing us and asking some of the questions that are talking at the heart of Nigerians.
Always my pleasure, and let me wish all of us Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas to you too. All right, we'll go to a very quick break. When we come back, I'll be heading to X to see what Nigerians are saying about the presidential media chat. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu held his first presidential media chat with journalists from Nigeria who asked him some key questions that had been tugging at the hearts of Nigerians. Now, the positive side to this conversation would be the fact that the conversation even happened, the media chat happened, especially because the president had come under a lot of criticism during his campaign season where he hadn't spoken with journalists. He was being criticized for not being available to journalists to ask questions and, to be able to face the media chat. But now it's finally happened. There's also been those who would argue about whether the media chat was live or it was recorded and have made much issue about that. But the core of the conversations will be the answers to some of the key questions that the president had regarding corruption, the fight against corruption, the state of the economy. He also did speak about the stampedes that have occurred that have, of course, led to the loss, unfortunately, of 65 Nigerian lives. There have also been, explorations about what the future holds for Nigerians. The president seems to think that there's no need for him to cut down his cabinet, even though, he's asked Nigerians to endure, saying that it's a painful decision, not, a painful reaction that what Nigerians are experiencing, a painful offshoot, of some of these policies that will start to yield results and that they've started to yield results. When being asked about if he should have, phased out the removal of subsidy, of course, the president thinks that everything he had done was done in the right way. And there have been several reactions to a number of these conversations on social media. There are those who applaud the president, saying that he's the most brilliant president that Nigeria has ever had and the most articulate, and there are others who think that the media chat was just a waste of time and that he barely answered questions in the way that he should. There's also been criticism as to some of the areas that should have been highlighted that weren't highlighted. But not my words. Let's get to hear the words of Nigerians across X. Mazi Nzako is our first tweet for today. And in the tweet, it says, recap of the broadcast. I feel your pain and suffering, but there's nothing I can do. I know reforms are painful, but it is necessary. It's like a child learning how to stand. It is painful. As your president, I will do whatever I can to make sure you can eat. Thank you, and God bless you, Tinubu. This, according to Mazi Nzako, is the recap of the president's media chat with the journalists. Zia David is the next tweet. She says, I wish and hope that a day will come when the president of the country will come live on air and take calls from average Nigerians who may all their lives not have the means of talking directly to their leader. It will help the president understand where the shoe pinches. First of all, this is an outrageous ask. I do not think that, many would argue that it's not going to ever happen. Let's not never say never. But we do not see countries where the president actually takes phone calls from citizens. And can we really say that the president is not aware of where the shoe pinches? It's what they're doing about it that matters. Tanimola Kolade says, President Bola Tinubu is really schooling these people on the media chat. Very brilliant mind. Very brilliant man. The doubters will be deleting their drafts now. He said removal of subsidy is anti-corruption. That is my president. Help the people grow and help them with the education of the children. Well, Olanusi Akintayo also shares thoughts saying these are just empty rhetorics as usual. We have been hearing this since May 29, 2023. The more he talks, the more things get harder for Nigerians. Our next tweet is from Mega Mixer, who says, President Tinubu claimed that some people were siphoning Nigeria's money through the petrol subsidy, necessitating the removal of the subsidy, subjecting people to untold hardship. Until now, he never named or prosecuted them. What is the disincentive for corruption in Nigeria? Valid question. Titilope Onwanifowoshe says, just watched President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's media chat, and I am more convinced than ever that he has what it takes to transform Nigeria. His vision and leadership give me hope for a brighter future. Hashtag Nigeria will rise. Isaac Olatunde says, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did well during his media chat, and no president since independence has been as eloquent and sincere with his answers. Look, you may not like the president because he wasn't your candidate. That's fine. You are free to choose a trader over a world-acclaimed technocrat, but find time to listen to his chat again. And if you still don't believe in him, then you are one of the enemies of this country. Isaac Olatunde, who are you throwing a jab at? We have Olu Abusola, who says, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said he has been given to the people in his home in Lagos for the last 25 years without people being stampeded. Baba, the economy was not that bad in those years compared to where it's going now or what is going on in the country. And the final tweet is from the Adeyemi, who says, so Cost of things will revert back to normal in 2025. Good to know. Praise ye the Lord. At least we have an end in sight. 1 crate of eggs equals to 5,000 naira. Good to know this is going back to under 1,000 naira pre-2023. Sounds very much sarcastic, because at the end of the day, regardless of the progress that we're seeing being made, NNPCL reducing from over 1,000 naira to a little over 900 naira in terms of cost of petrol, the resultant effect should be a high reduction in the cost of living. A reduction in the cost of living that would make sense to most Nigerians. Will not be saying people can buy petrol for as low as 900 naira. Bearing in mind that when this administration came into office, we were buying petrol under 200 naira and still complaining. So it's been a massive increase in the cost of living. Nigerians are spending more and earning less. Yes, the minimum wage has been increased to 70,000 naira. But how many people watching me or watching this show right now can say that their salaries have been increased to match the current realities of the Nigerian economy? These are some of the thoughts the Nigerians have. And we'll keep sharing your thoughts every other day on the show, because what Nigerians are saying definitely matter to us. When we return again, it will officially be the Christmas edition of Breakfast Central. But we want to say thank you so much for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central to look at these conversations, especially focusing on the presidential media chat. We acknowledge that it's really a hard time for the nation. So as much as you can, reach out to people who you can support. If you have enough to share, please share with people. But please be careful about the sharing so you don't cause a stampede. We hope that at the end of the day, we can all find ways to find little pockets of joy in this season that is not so merry. We'll see you again tomorrow. I am Olive Emodi.
And I'm Osaugi Ogbonwa. I'm wishing you a very brilliant day ahead. And of course, it's going to be Christmas Day in 24 hours, so happy Christmas in advance. We'll be back again tomorrow morning. Bye for now.